In the heart of a rural African village stood Lamora High School, a modest institution renowned for its picturesque surroundings. Nestled near the school was a dense forest and a shimmering river called Nyaza, which served as a lifeline for the village. This river was said to be sacred, guarded by an ancient spirit that villagers spoke of in hushed tones. Most students avoided the river, except for the daring few who ventured there while working on the school farm. Among these brave students were Toby, Amara, Kwaku, and Sifa, a group of ambitious science enthusiasts, curious and unafraid of village folklore. They often discussed the mysteries of Nyaza during their breaks. One day, while exploring the riverbank, they noticed strange, glimmering stones scattered across the waterbed. Toby, the most adventurous of them, decided to collect a few for their school science project, unaware that this act had awakened the river spirit. That evening, the group sat under a large baobab tree near the farm, examining the stones. They noticed that the stones emitted a faint glow in the dark, unlike anything they'd seen before. Sifa, who loved storytelling, recounted tales she had heard from her grandmother about the river spirit. Though her friends laughed it off, unease crept into their hearts. The stones, though fascinating, felt otherworldly. As dusk settled, a strange wind blew through the farm, carrying whispers that seemed to originate from the river. Toby dismissed it as coincidence, but Kwaku insisted they leave the stones behind. Amara, eager to stand out in their upcoming science fair, convinced the group to keep them. They carefully packed the stones into a bag and promised to explore their potential in the school lab the next day. When they finally returned to the dormitory, they struggled to sleep. Each of them felt a strange connection to the stones, as though an invisible thread was pulling them back to the river. In their dreams that night, they all saw the same vision, a luminous figure emerging from the depths of Nyaza, its presence both enchanting and terrifying. The figure introduced itself as Nyaru, the spirit guardian of the river, and promised them unimaginable knowledge in exchange for their loyalty. It spoke of unlocking secrets hidden for centuries, secrets that could change the world if handled correctly. The next morning, 4 friends gathered in the school courtyard, hesitant to discuss their dreams. Yet, as they looked into each other's eyes, they realized they had all seen the same vision. Compelled by curiosity and a sense of destiny, they agreed to return to the river after school. That afternoon, the students ventured back to the river, carrying the glowing stones with them. The air felt heavier as they approached, and the water's surface shimmered unnaturally. When they reached the riverbank, Nyaru appeared once more, this time in broad daylight. The spirit's voice echoed in their minds, urging them to blend the stones with elements they could find in their school lab. It promised to guide them toward groundbreaking discoveries. Initially skeptical, the students were soon swept up in the spirit's persuasive power. Back at the lab, they worked feverishly, blending the river stones with various chemicals they had never dared to use before. Amara, who was skilled in chemistry, led the group in mixing compounds, while Toby documented their findings. Kwaka monitored reactions, and Sifa theorized about potential applications. Their experiments grew increasingly complex, but the results were undeniable. They had created a potent chemical compound unlike anything they'd seen. The compound, which they named Nyathian in honor of the river, exhibited extraordinary properties. It could accelerate plant growth, enhance soil fertility, and even purify contaminated water. The students were ecstatic, believing they had discovered a solution to the agricultural challenges plaguing their community. They decided to keep their work a secret until they could perfect it. As days turned into weeks, the students transformed. They seemed tireless, spending long hours in the lab and often skipping meals. Teachers praised their ingenuity, unaware of the strange dreams and whispered voices that guided the students. Toby began sketching intricate formulas in his notebook, claiming they came to him in his sleep. Amara, who was usually cautious, grew bold, suggesting riskier experiments. Kwaka's normally cheerful demeanor turned somber, and Sifa, once the skeptic, became the most fervent believer in Nyaru's guidance. Despite their initial excitement, the group began to notice unsettling changes in themselves. Toby's hands occasionally trembled, and his eyes glowed faintly under dim light. Amara developed an unusual sensitivity to sunlight, while Kwaku often muttered incoherently, as though in conversation with an unseen entity. Sifa, once vibrant and outspoken, grew eerily quiet, her gaze often fixed on the horizon as though she were searching for something. One evening, as they worked late in the lab, Nyaru's voice echoed louder than ever, commanding them to test Nyathian on a larger scale. The spirit promised them greatness, but warned them not to question its instructions. The students, now fully under Nyaru's influence, agreed without hesitation.
News of the students' invention spread quickly. The village elders, wary of anything connected to Nyaza, urged the school to destroy the substance. The students, however, refused, claiming it held the potential to revolutionize agriculture. Pressured by both sides, they decided to demonstrate Nyathian's power by testing it on a plot of land near the school farm. The initial results were astounding. Crops grew faster, greener, and healthier. Encouraged, the students expanded their testing, applying Nyathian to a larger area. Within days, the crops withered and died. Animals that grazed nearby fell ill, and a foul stench filled the air. Soon, the poison seeped into the soil and spread to other parts of the community. Streams and rivers dried up, leaving Nyaza as the only source of water in the region. Panic gripped the village as plants wilted, animals perished, and the people's health deteriorated. The school's headmaster, Mr. Ikeen, confronted the students, demanding an explanation. Cornered, they revealed the truth about their dreams and the guidance of Nyaru. The revelation shocked the community, deepening their fear of the river spirit. The elders performed rituals to appease Nyaru, but the spirit's wrath seemed unrelenting. The students, now fully possessed by Nyaru's influence, saw no fault in their actions. They believed the devastation was a test of the villagers' worthiness, and that salvation lay in embracing the river's power. Their obsession grew, and they began spending nights by Nyaza, chanting incomprehensible phrases and conducting rituals of their own. Toby, who had always been a leader, began acting as though he were a prophet of Nyaru, delivering cryptic messages to his friends. Meanwhile, the village descended into chaos. Crops failed, and food became scarce. Families fled to neighboring villages, but many were too afraid to leave Nyaza's vicinity. The river's water remained pure, but its presence felt ominous. The elders' rituals grew more elaborate, but none succeeded in calming the spirit's fury. In a final act of desperation, the village's eldest woman, Mama Abney, approached the river alone. She carried with her offerings and whispered a prayer she'd learned as a child. Nyaru appeared before her, expressing disappointment in humanity's greed and recklessness. Mama Abney pleaded for forgiveness, promising to honor the river and teach the next generation respect for its power. Moved by her sincerity, Nyaru agreed to lift the curse but demanded one final act. The students must return Nyathian to the river and leave behind all they had taken. Torn between their loyalty to Nyaru and their love for their community, the students complied, casting the chemical and the stones back into the water. The river shimmered brilliantly, and over time, the land began to heal. Though the community recovered, the events left an indelible mark. Nyaza remained sacred, and the tale of the four students served as a cautionary story for generations to come. The spirit of knowledge is powerful, but it demands respect and humility. In the years that followed, the villagers erected a shrine by Nyaza to honor Nyaru and remind everyone of the balance between humanity and nature. The students, though forgiven, carried the weight of their actions for the rest of their lives. They became advocates for sustainable science, ensuring that their mistakes would never be repeated. The aftermath of the tragedy at Nyaza River left the community of Lamora in shambles. What had once been a lush, thriving village was now a wasteland of withered crops, lifeless streams, and desolation. The people, who had always depended on the land for sustenance, found themselves staring at barren fields and empty water vessels. This was not just a story of environmental ruin, but a tale of a community grappling with despair, unity, and the slow road to recovery. The poisoning of the soil and water brought life in the village to a grinding halt. The vibrant marketplace, once filled with the hum of trade, laughter, and conversation, became eerily silent. Vendors had nothing to sell, and families had little to eat. Livestock, the backbone of many households, either fell ill or died, leaving families without milk, meat, or income. Streams that once flowed with clear, life-sustaining water were reduced to trickles of sludge, except for the ominously pristine Nyaza River, which no one dared approach. Children, who had once roamed freely and played by the riverside, now stayed indoors, their laughter replaced by cries of hunger and thirst. Schools, including Lamora High, struggled to remain open. Teachers watched helplessly as students weakened by malnutrition and sickness stopped attending classes. The tragedy had left no one untouched. The contamination quickly escalated into a health crisis. Skin rashes, respiratory problems, and mysterious illnesses began to plague the villagers. The local clinic, ill-equipped to handle the scale of the disaster, became overcrowded. Medicines ran out within weeks, and the few healthcare workers available worked tirelessly, their efforts often feeling futile. Elderly members of the community, already vulnerable, were the first to succumb to the mysterious ailments. Pregnant women and children followed. The once close-knit community, known for its vibrant gatherings and ceremonies, began holding frequent funerals instead. Each burial was a stark reminder of the tragedy's cost, deepening the villagers' despair. With no crops to harvest and no livestock to rear, the village's economy collapsed. Farmers, who had once been the pride of Lamora, stood idle, their tools rusting in abandoned fields. The village's few artisans, who relied on a steady flow of goods and trade, found themselves without customers. Even those who ventured to neighboring communities to seek work faced rejection, as Lamora's plight was widely known and outsiders feared contamination. Families began selling their belongings to buy food and water, but these resources were scarce and expensive. Some villagers chose to migrate to nearby towns, hoping to start anew, but many lacked the means to leave. For those who remained, each day became a test of endurance. Amid the chaos, the village elders convened an emergency council. They knew the community could not survive without collective action. Though the villagers were still wary of Nyaza and its spirit, the elders decided to seek help from government agencies and non-governmental organizations. A delegation was sent to the regional capital to petition for aid. Initial responses were slow. The village's remote location and the scale of the disaster made it difficult to mobilize resources. However, as word of Lamora's plight spread, environmental activists and journalists began drawing attention to the crisis. This pressure eventually brought much-needed support. Relief organizations arrived with food, clean water, and medical supplies, offering a glimmer of hope to the beleaguered villagers. The youth of Lamora, particularly those unaffected by Nyaru's possession, played a crucial role in rebuilding the community. Inspired by the resilience of their elders, they formed committees to organize relief efforts. They distributed food and water, cared for the sick, and worked tirelessly to clean up the contaminated land.
One group, led by a young woman named Amina, began researching ways to neutralize the poisoned soil. Collaborating with environmental scientists who had come to study the disaster, they experimented with bioremediation techniques, using plants and microbes to absorb and break down harmful chemicals. Though progress was slow, their efforts sparked hope. The community's spiritual leaders recognized that rebuilding would require more than physical recovery. It needed reconciliation with Nyaru. Mama Abani, the village's eldest woman and a revered figure, proposed a grand ceremony to seek forgiveness and restore balance. Preparations for the ceremony united the villagers in a way they hadn't experienced since the tragedy began. Men crafted intricate offerings from natural materials, women prepared traditional foods, and children practiced songs and dances. The ceremony, held under the full moon by Nyaza's banks, was a solemn and heartfelt plea for mercy. As the villagers sang and danced, the river seemed to shimmer with a soft, ethereal light. Though Nyaru did not appear, the villagers felt a collective sense of peace. The ceremony rekindled their faith and gave them the strength to continue their recovery efforts. The journey to full recovery was arduous and required years of relentless effort. Scientists eventually identified and contained the spread of Nyathian, allowing the soil and water to slowly regenerate. Farmers received training in sustainable practices to prevent future disasters. Schools reopened, and children returned to their classrooms, albeit with fewer classmates than before. Over time, the village's economy began to stabilize. Women formed cooperatives to produce and sell crafts, while men explored alternative livelihoods such as fishing and beekeeping. A small but thriving tourism industry emerged, centered around Nyaza River and its mystical history. The tragedy left an indelible mark on Lamora. It served as a cautionary tale about the consequences of greed and the importance of respecting nature's balance. The students who had created Nyathian, though forgiven, carried the weight of their actions for the rest of their lives. They became advocates for ethical science, dedicating themselves to ensuring that such a disaster would never happen again. The villagers, too, learned to cherish their environment and their community. They established strict rules to protect Nyaza and its surrounding ecosystem. Every year, on the anniversary of the ceremony, they held a festival to honor Nyaru and celebrate their resilience. Though the scars of the tragedy would never fully fade, Lamora emerged stronger, united by the trials they had endured. Their story became a beacon of hope and a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, humanity's capacity for perseverance and renewal can prevail.